Teachers who regularly get invited to high school reunions. What are the most amazing transformations, common patterns, epic stories, saddest declines, etc. you've seen through the years? Not a teacher, but interesting nonetheless. The valedictorian of my graduating class lost his full ride to state college after 2 quarters because of drinking and drugs. He grew up in a protected and very strict household. Once he left and got exposed to the temptations of life, he didn't know how to handle it. Last I heard, he's working odd jobs and is bumming around our hometown. I sat beside this girl Joni in grade 8. She was so smart and really pretty. She would always finish the year with like 95 averages, even as high as 98 in some subjects. I was a hooligan, that's why I was seated next to her. She would help me with stuff, always let me copy her homework, peek at tests. There's no way I would have passed without her. The teacher would always say you'll never get anywhere if you just copy Joni all the time. She works the drive-thru at A&W now. Has a herd of children with some skeezy looking dude who's in and out of jail. Breaks my heart when I see her. So much potential to end up flipping burgers, I always wonder where it went wrong for her. 9 times out of 10. TTY home life. Just finally got to her. Found someone who loved her like she wasn't at home and got pregnant. Not a teacher, but a girl I used to be interested in since elementary school. We were really close friends. I'd even work for her dad when I was a kid. Stuffing envelopes for him to send out to his clients. Just basic stuff that he offered us 10 cents per envelope to be a nice guy. In high school, we drifted a little bit apart, and she started dating another friend of mine who shortly after noped out of that relationship because she wanted him to make her pregnant. Fast forward a couple years after graduation. She did have children, who she then suffocated when they were 3 years old and 22 months old. Sentenced to over 40 years in jail. She was smart, pretty, and charming. And now she might never see the outside world again. Former student who was a decent kid who tried. Just not the brightest. Graduated, got a job at Whataburger. Got fired because he kept showing up late. His manager was his mom. 8 of my 438 student graduating class, 2009, have passed from opioid overdose. The reunion is this July. 13 dead out of 217. Class of 2011. 2 car wrecks. 1 suicide. 1 dead soldier. 1 lost at sea. And the rest overdosed. We did a 5-year reunion just because we lost like 4 of them during year 4. I swear. Staying in your hometown after high school will kill ya. Not a teacher, but there was a guy who was the stereotypical jock in high school. Very unemotional, stoic, etc. Then he went into the military and got PTSD. Now he is a hippie and psychotherapist. The dumb FCKS that graduated my year of 2001 tried to organize our 10-year reunion in 2010. Do teachers get to go to high school reunions? That seems like a recipe for finding out if the English teacher really did have a dolphin tramp stamp. Edit. Apparently teachers are invited. Neat. I'm really hoping for a Kevin update one of these days. In high school I was pretty good friends with a guy that was a bit overweight. About 6'4". Really smart and a bit nerdy. Lost track of him after high school but saw him at our 10-year reunion. He was the talk of the reunion. Still tall. Lost all the weight and was in great shape. Had long hair like Fabio and was a doctor. He showed up with a beautiful wife. He gave us his contact info and invited us to Atlanta to stay with him in his huge house. After the reunion I tried to get in touch. Contact info didn't work. And through some sleuthing I found out he was neither married nor a doctor. He was still in good shape. Can't fake that. But faked everything else. I didn't go to my 20th. But saw the list of dead people. I tried to look them up in my yearbook. But shockingly, every single one of the 7-8 people were in the no picture section. Which was maybe 5% of the class. So either the yearbook cast a curse, or there's some correlation between not being able, not wanting to take a yearbook picture, and dying young. I have a few. One guy was the star pupil. Smart, handsome, athletic, everything. Dating the head cheerleader. Some Hallmark movie shitty. They leave, go off to college, and nobody thinks it'll go wrong. Come 10 years later. She divorced him. Was given the house his late grandfather built in the divorce. And lived there with her new lover while he was in a hotel. 10-year reunion happens. He's deathly skinny and depressed. Sees the school. Remembers the memories he had. Goes home after reunion and kills himself. Leaving behind 2 little girls. His ex got chased out of the community last year. Death threats against her and her lover. I'm a middle school teacher of over 10 years, so some of my students are high school and college graduates at this point. I'm happy to say that a good number of them have reached out to me to share life stories and updates. The one student that comes to mind was confidentially suicidal from a broken home with identity issues. She came to me for help, and we found spoken word poetry as an outlet for her emotions, anxiety, and discovery of self-worth. She is currently returning to school to finish her associate's degree, and she was the first in her family to graduate HS. I get updates from her on my birthday each year. She still writes and performs spoken word poetry in her spare time. Edit. Wow, I did not expect to get this kind of overwhelming response. Yes. I have a million other stories, many of which don't have as happy of an ending. But yes. This is why I love being a teacher, and yes, I love hearing from my students years later. Though very few actually reach out. So, not a school reunion story. But I thought I'd input a happy story since a lot of these are a bit depressing. Semicolon. My mom used to be a teacher for children with severe learning disabilities. By severe, I mean the majority of students she taught could barely do anything for themselves. Now she's retired. But one day we were in the supermarket when a lady comes up to my mom and hugs her. She seems a bit surprised at first and asks if they know each other. And it turns out she used to be in her class. We get in the car and mom instantly breaks down in tears. After a few minutes she explains to me that 20 years ago, that lady had been unable to speak, walk, or even go to the bathroom by herself. And yet there she was, out on her own, talking to us and doing her own grocery shopping. What probably made my mom cry was that after so long and accomplishing so much, this girl actually remembered her old teacher. A former student of mine grew up in an ultra-conservative Christian home. He and his siblings were never allowed to socialize with other students during lunch and recess. Whenever they had free time at school, they had to read their Bibles. In science class they were forbidden to learn about evolution. Every essay, short story, personal narrative, and poem he wrote for me involved some kind of Christian theme. When he graduated, he immediately enrolled in a big seminary in our area, and that was the last I heard of him until his class invited me to their 10-year reunion. This same kid showed up with sleeve tattoos, piercings everywhere, slamming beer after beer after beer and smoking like a locomotive. When I asked what he was doing now, he responded he currently was a bouncer at a strip club. A frustrating thing as a teacher is not being able to remember all the kids you've taught. I've taught roughly 150 kids a year for 15 years. So it becomes hard to remember specific things about every student. I feel like a D-bag when a kid who really enjoyed my class comes up and asks me questions about life for the class she was in, and I can't remember much about it. I've found that I usually remember high-achieving creative students or kids who were badly behaved, as I have a soft spot for these kids. Since I usually remember the badly behaved kids, I have noticed that most of them figured it out by the time they reach 30. Most have great jobs and are well adjusted. Conversely, many of the high-achieving students end up dropping out of college and are working low-wage jobs. I don't believe that high school is much of an indicator of future success. As long as you graduate high school and attempt college, how you performed in high school will not be that important. At a reunion, My English teacher told me not to be an English teacher. Then we started pounding wine. And I complimented her on her, then, recent publication of a romance novel. It was actually a great read. I commented that she had clearly been naughtier than I'd previously realized. Had my 10th year in the past year. Lots of people came into town. During the actual reunion there was a lot of bragging and obvious flexing. Fast forward to the end of the night and people are planning an after party. I end up going to it and the buzz that everyone had had at the primary event is replaced with sloppy drunkenness. And the previous boastfulness is replaced with them all confessing their insecurities, their health problems, their loveless marriages, that they hate their jobs and bosses. Was a bit awkward. In my high school they used some of the class reps as volunteers in order to organize this 10-year meeting. At that time class master told me that a super good looking woman, she was 29 back then. I was 17 and damn she was top 3 woman I've ever seen in my life, was one of the dirtiest students she ever had. She would not shower for days and at some point she was out of school for a week or so because she got a really bad infection from her period and lack of showers. Also one of the smartest guys from that generation, who went to veterinary school, was convicted for selling some sort of animals drugs to people and used some on himself. He seemed super normal. But when he spoke you could tell that there were some clicks in his brains that were not connecting at all. Losing the idea in the middle of the sentence. Couldn't keep the voice at the same tone for more than 10 seconds. Going from whispering to shouting and stuff. Used to have this one kid in my art class in senior high who treated it like one of those easy to pass classes. He was a big guy. Much bigger than the other students. And he'd use his size and strength to bully other kids. The smaller ones. He was a little bitch underneath it all. He would draw guns and crosses in his art book with pseudo gangster sayings like live by da gun, die by da gun, and FCK da police. You get the idea. Come reunion time, which was some 5 years later, he's found a girl who really reined him in and, kind of like a hunter taming a wolf, really turned him into a good man. They had a baby boy. And he's a responsible father and does yoga on the rocks by the beach. Complete 180. I do think he was a good guy underneath it all. He just needed direction from someone who could break down his walls. Edit. I wasn't invited to my 20-year high school reunion. Which seems totally appropriate. Not necessarily a reunion. But I was at a party, late, one night and a kid from our class, who just moved back, had came to the party in a new Cadillac. We all thought he was doing great. He left and never thought about the car twice. He had killed, then raped, his elderly neighbor. That was her car. She was in the trunk when he came to that party. He was convicted and given the death penalty. Again. I am not a teacher but a 35-year-old. I went to high school in Venezuela. I left the country when I was 17 and never saw any of them until what you might call a virtual reunion on Facebook a few years back. The reason I got to even know they had a group? The guy everyone knew bullied me was shot and killed by his best friend at the time. Apparently he kept being a bastard after graduating and thus that was the end result. Besides that, most of my classmates moved from the country due to the crisis. Those who stayed are having a bad time. Like everyone else in the country. It is weird seeing them in Facebook in random countries and doing things which I would never expect from them as a teen. One is a cook in Sweden, other is an MMA fighter in California. One is an accountant in Australia. Plenty of middle class lives in other South American countries. Simply interesting. Edit. Thank you for the gold. Kind stranger. A previous student of mine grew up in a horrible home situation. This individual was really smart and I did my best to help them apply, receive many scholarships and grants. And eventually went to an Ivy League school to get away from their abusive home life. They made it big, and I mean big, big time millionaire. Made their family jealous, but in the end their hard work paid off. It was great to see and I was so proud of what they'd become. Edit. The best thing was seeing them break the chain. The family had problems going back numerous generations, and to see this generation change was all worth it. Edit 2. Wow, you guys are all so nice. Honestly, I wasn't trying to be a hero or anything. Just felt like I was put in a place where I could really help someone, and the outcome was phenomenal for this individual. Just so you all know, this person recently applied for a part-time teaching job at a public inner city school in order to mentor others from similar backgrounds. I guess karma finds a way, right? Cheers. I'm currently a high schooler right now and reading all of these comments. It's crazy to think that so much can change in such a short amount of time. It also seems that for the people who try to be popular in high school ends up being the highlight of their life. And it all falls apart from there. Not a teacher, but was at school with one girl. Very geeky. Very exuberant. She was in all the school drama productions. And she would tell everyone that she was going to be a famous actress someday. We were like, yeah, whatever. No one from little old New Zealand ever cracks that level of fame these days. She's been the female lead in a number of movies now, alongside people like Woody Harrelson, Ewan McGregor, Courtney B. Vance, Mark Rylance, to name a few. I actually got to be on stage with her in a school production. So she is my ticket into 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon. A student of mine went through a really tough time. His dad was actually convicted of attempted murder on his mother during his time at school, which sent the mom into a sort of apathetic depression. I walked him to trial. I testified. I was in close contact with his therapist and social services. He's now a year from taking his master's in software engineering, and he has a baby on the way. He's really happy, and his wife is the sweetest you'll ever meet. He told me that I was his role model for parenting. Made me cry. Like ugly snot. Can't breathe crying. I wish him all the luck in the world. He's gonna be a great dad. Not a teacher. Hell, not even 10 years yet, but a large chunk of my class is dead from overdoses. One of my then friends is in jail for selling fentanyl-laced heroin that killed somebody, and another for murdering his daughter. So, yeah, no. Basic stuff. I refused to go to my 10-year reunion after our class president and treasurer decided to try and charge $170,000 a head to book this fancy place in a garden. Needed 100 people to book it of a class size of around 300. She got about 20 people. So instead of returning the money and picking something cheaper so we all could go, she pocketed the money and took her and her friends from high school out to an expensive all-day romp around San Francisco. Shopping, dinner, drinks included. To say people were pissed would be an understatement. And sure, if she returned the money, everyone opted out of the class Facebook page after that stunt. Not a teacher. But here's a story. I avoided my high school reunion, but because I didn't attend, I was contacted by an old friend who had hoped to see me there. While catching up, he asked if I had heard what happened to my old bully and gave me a few minutes to Google the lady. The first Google hit was about her being arrested for having sex with a student. I laughed my ass off until I read that she was employed at a middle school. I stopped laughing and started calling my family. My sister told me that when she was a sophomore, my bully's brother confided in her that the kids in their family were routinely sorely abused by their extremely religious father. Basically, in 20 minutes I went from not remembering that this girl existed, to remembering how she treated me, to feeling schadenfreude at her failures, then utter repulsion and disgust, then heartbreak and sadness at the cycle of abuse. I would have rather just carried on not remembering that she existed. Not a teacher, but we just had our reunion. There was this one dude who was just not even geeky, but just odd. Always trying to fit in and never quite managing it. He had a couple popular friends though, so most times he could use that as a way in. I remember at graduation he was just approaching random groups of people trying to start conversations and was just super unsuccessful at it. And I was a huge geek myself. So if this dude appeared socially inept to me of all people, He was super socially inept. Because I was too inept myself to notice stuff like this unless it was bad. Anyways, he's on all the bus benches around me now because he's the MLA for an area close to me now. The first time I saw it I was like WTF. Like there's no way this kid could have gotten people to vote for him. I guess even the most socially inept can grow up and thrive. But here I am still as socially inept as I was in high school, lol. I taught biology and this one student who was really smart but hung out with a bunch of bad apples. Like they made fun of him for getting straight A's so much that he would purposely try to score lower so he would fit in the more. I pulled him aside and laid it out to him like, WTF are you doing? Your so-called friends are all jealous of your skills and intellect, so don't waste it to impress people who don't give a FCK about you. Yes, broke professionalism by cursing and gave him the raw details because this guy was just that smart. He waved me down at his reunion and told me he was accepted into the Sophie Davis Duo BSMD program.